I'm Tom Colbert, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Man, I love doing this. I love being able to talk with Tom, the case breakers. Of course, also going to pop into the big screen here. My former commander in Bosnia. This guy commanded a bunch of counterintelligence agents in a deployed zone, which is about as hard a job as a commander can get handed. Plus, our unit was so screwed up. It's so in so many ways. But I love being able to do this. I've known Erik now. Gosh, Erik, it's 25 years since we first interacted, and we've done, I don't know, 10 plus episodes of the Break It Down show. It's always great to have you on, and I can't wait to talk about DB Cooper.
Absolutely. And and I had more hair there and you had less. So it was all works out.
I did have less hair. I've lost some up here, but I'm down here.
Exactly.
And Tom, I just wanted to introduce you again too. Tom runs the Case Breakers. These guys break the cold cases that we all have seen in search of episodes on. I mean, DB Cooper, you guys are working on Hoffa at some level, Zodiac from my hometown. I mean, these are all things that people have talked about and been passionate about and written books about for decades now. And you guys are cracking and breaking these cases and solving them.
Yeah, we're well. Look, Erik is one of the first on our team, and we're now up to 40. And as I've said before, this is 1,500 years of skill sets with these 40 folks in every field possible. And I expected one great mystery to be solved with my wife. We said, let's get this team going. Maybe we can solve one that can help build our name, turn into a nonprofit, expand. Well, now we've got the four biggest. And the one you didn't mention was the Atlanta child murders in the early 80s. That's right. The missing child there, we know what happened to him now. And it's a very intriguing story. So, these guys are unstoppable. And of course, we've got small teams, as Erik can tell you about. Jen, why don't you go into that? Erik, talk about why we're focusing on small groups going off on cases too.
Well, part of the model is that you can have, you can go after these the four cases that we have. These are like considered the holy grails of cold cases. These are 40, 50-year-old cases. But, in the reality is there's, 1,800 cold cases every year. There's thousands of them are never solved. And these are not, just like most of our cases, honestly, are more historical investigations than anything else. But the ones that our team members are working on, like Jen Buchholz in Lubbock, Texas now, and formerly working in another case in Arkansas, these are real people with real victims, real family members. I mean, those are the cases that don't, after the initial local stories of somebody's missing or, somebody has been killed without any, closure to it. Those are the ones where their people are still suffering. And that's, it's fun to do Hoffa. It's fun to do, to learn some of the details about Cooper or the Zodiac killer. That what you're really there, the real purpose is that there are still people suffering. Even the Atlanta child murders, there are still people suffering from that case. And that was 41 years ago. There are still family members that are hurting.
I want to add very quickly, Erik, we also have a wonderful guy named Bill Proctor, who has a former cop, former journalist. And what is he doing now? He's going after those that are wrongly in jail. And then he identifies the ones that put him there. Such a key unit that he's putting together. So there's some wonderful 2-3-man teams that are out in the field. And that is really going to be our bread and butter in the future.
The thing about all of these cases is they have a legacy, and people have made long livings on these cases not being solved. I mean, the Donna Lass family doesn't get closure in part because everybody's got their dog in the fight. Even if it's not the winning dog, it's the dog that makes them money. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Erik?
Well, part of what we're seeing now, and again, and Pete, that the CooperCon was held, the 50th anniversary was held November 24th on the 50th anniversary of Cooper's jump. Our team was disinvited from that conference. And, when you look into the reasons why and, what was the either reason stated or what we thought, it's, I've only come to the conclusion that there is an entire mystery industry that thrives off of these cases, and therefore these cases become their currency. They can't have these cases solved, because then that gets rid of the currency on how these folks are supporting either their hobbies or their livelihood. And that's really, God, Lord, that's tougher. We find that we're having a tough time working with law enforcement that doesn't want to concentrate on a case 50 years old or whatever. But you're also going against these headwinds of folks that just quite honestly don't want the case to be solved unless they're the ones solving it, from retired investigative reporters to just cyber sleuths on their own. Like, we can't have this case solved. We're living off of this.
And I would add that I've heard from Cooperites to Zodiacers to Hoffedites. They are all upset, talking about, oh, who is this team? How come we've never heard of them? Yeah. And that's the greatest, you might say, compliment that we do. We don't make headlines unless we run into a snag like we did in Riverside. But no, they all have the dog in the game, and we're not in that game.
When you say Hoffedites, I want to call them the Hofflidays, because that's Tom Moore, and the guy who tells the story of Utopia. His last name is Hoffliday, and his name actually means the purveyor of nonsense. So just a thought on that, the Hofflidays.
I love it.
Okay.
The thing with these people too, and it being solved, a lot of them in their heads it's solved. Graysmith went a long way towards keeping the Zodiac story alive and making it continue to be relevant. He gets all the credit in the world for that. He sold a lot of books, but his guy was Arthur Lee Allen, except for the Zodiac is not Arthur Lee Allen.
Right.
And so how many people can be like, no, it's there, it's in the book.
Right. Well, there's also a psychological resistance to new information that refutes somebody's already preconceived, notion of how a case was supposed to be solved. And so when you run into, again, that's an additional resistance that you have to overcome. It's like, how dare you solve this case or how dare you present evidence that refutes my own perceived notion of who the killer is supposed to be? Right. I will never believe you until I see information that exonerates my decision making, and what I've come up with. And since that's never going to come, I'm going to stick to those guns, and nobody is going to be allowed to solve this, because I don't want to be proven wrong, even in my own mind. I
would say that also occurs with the agencies too, Eric. We're talking about the politics of the agencies. They're trying to keep, away from a 50-year-old case, as you said. For example, and I think I shared this with you guys and Pete, we talked about that we couldn't get any traction after the first documentary. They wouldn't even accept our evidence. They said we looked at the evidence and there was nothing there. No, they didn't look at the evidence. They shut the door on us. And we have the number one book that has had not one book review, but word of mouth. It's had over 100 5-stars. It's because the FBI has shut down the video stories that have been shot. 4 of them were spiked for the national networks. Our AP articles were spiked. Nothing aired. And it's all about ego and the department's looking good.
There's a lot of truth in that in a lot of different industries. I know my brother-in-law, Steve, here, he said the pharmaceutical industry, where you get things. And also the other ring that you kind of talked about earlier, Tom, was the who are the case breakers? And in our field, this entertainment, this media field, I can do all the great content I want. I mean, look, I've got you guys on this show, talking about the biggest cases of the last 50 years and breaking them, but I'm not allowed to be in the front of the line. I can say no thanks to Fox News, no thanks to CNN, and what gets pushed in front of me on YouTube is more Fox News than CNN, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have good content, you can't know about me because I'm not allowed in the front line of the marketplace. And not because of quality of content, because of the revenue that you generate by selling all of this misery and everything else. So it's a big problem with trying to get to the truth.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And I know Eric can play to that call too. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I mean, it's like, what are you doing solving this problem? We're living off of this problem. We have to have this problem. I mean, it's more than just the pharmaceutical industry that does it. There's any industry that involves that is there to combat a wrong or an evil or a slight or whatever, that wrong or evil becomes the currency that they need to have continually. And that's, and I hate to get into the wade into the political piece about this, but that's part of why there's so much, we still have continual racial animosity. It's just, there's certain elements that need to have that stoked up. And so our media is going to do its damnedest to make sure that keeps going, because what does that do? That gets viewers, that gets pieces. And same thing with like CooperCon. Why would you ever want to invite a team that was going to come up to the 50th anniversary of CooperCon and say, hey, you don't need to have these anymore. We've solved it.
Yeah.
And that's just like, well, these guys just ruined everything. So, it goes well beyond the solving of the crime itself, and it becomes the industry and the business process that now thrives off of it.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to ask, because I know, Tom, on your side, with the reporting side, you can send in a Freedom of Information Act request, a FOIA request into the CIA, FBI. And Erik, about classifications, especially things that are ESCI and they're compartmented. And so someone who is working for the CIA like Rackstraw, there must be a mountain of paper about operations he did. How come we can't get access to that? Is the time not passed, or is that not a viable path?
One of the problems you run into is, if you're, classified operations, the default timeline is 50 years from the end of the class, and that's automatic declassification. Now, that's unless somebody with declassification authority either steps in and says, no, we're going to make that longer, or we're going to make it shorter. So if nobody touches an operation, now let's talk in terms of Air America, where we know that our guy, Rackstraw, flew for Air America on the side as a side mission while he was in Vietnam. His involvement, you say, well, we can declassify, Air America. We're running up on 50 years from that, so we should be able to declassify and know all that. Well, not if somebody stepped in, and not if elements of that operation continued on in the 80s. And that's our next piece that we looked at, is we think Rackstraw continued to fly as an asset for the agency, for Iran-Contra, and for the Latin American operations during the Reagan years. So it's not 50 years from when he was doing Air America. It's 50 years from his, it could be seen as 50 years from his last involvement as an asset for the agency. And that could have been in the late 80s. So, so guess what? We still got a little bit of time to wait on that.
Yeah, and we also have all sorts of information that has been brought forward, and unless people, the book has been updated with 3 new chapters on the history, and it talks about when he passed on, and what do you know? We got his death file, just like MLK. Eventually, we got the death file, and in it is agent after agent, and people can see it if they go down to the casebreakers.org and click on the DB Cooper section. They can see recent articles that we planted in England because we couldn't get any planting here articles. And lo and behold, agent after agent in the memos is saying, yes, he is our prime suspect. And people want to deny that? Fine. Fine. We moved on.
I'll take this too as a counterintelligence agent. When you have someone that can handle a certain aspect of a job, delivering something in an airplane, doing dangerous things, that just becomes an operational asset, and it's not like, who do we find? Like, we already have a guy for that, and you're not going to stop using. I mean, if Erik and I are working on something that involves, intelligence, and we need to do, we're just going to know, like, we're going to task that out. Like, we need this air asset moved from here to there. And the person with the Air Force uniform is on to be like, I'm going to task this air asset, and then it's going to get tasked, and then he's going to get handed a piece of paper, because you don't stop. You just eventually you have to stop. But if you're still operationally capable, you're going to get employed.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So when it comes to Cooper and all of the resistance, I mean, right now there's even a guy in the chat that I'm trying to, Nicholas Broughton, who's talking about how he and everything. And maybe you guys know who Nicholas is.
Oh, yes.
We talk about definitive things. You guys have definitive things. You have a piece of the parachute. You have a lot of very specific information, stuff you put in front of Rackstraw that he didn't deny.
Right.
So yeah, I will tell you, old Nicky goes way back with us. He was Rackstraw's partner. He doesn't want to admit it, but we confronted him with our cyber team. when we found out that he was working with Rackstraw. And when he was confronted that he may be a witness in when Rackstraw was alive, he may be a witness in a criminal case, he suddenly said, no, I don't know him. I don't know him. I mean, it was hilarious. So Nick has hit a long history of with aiding Rackstraw. They actually knew each other. So I find it funny his name pops up. Another denier. It's
So when you continue to add chapters, how long do you guys work on DB Cooper until you're done? I mean, at some point you're going to stop, right?
Well, he did die 2 years ago, so that helped end it. And we got all the information from the files that we could. Of the 150 pages, about 100 were white, just totally blanked out. And we have no doubt that deals with the CIA background around the world. And again, that's not important to us. Mm-hmm. We are not challenging our people that are keeping us safe in the shadows. What we challenged was a suspect with 30 some odd criminal titles, 22 identities, and jobs in 5 countries. I mean, he was off the scales. And that's what we explain. We talk about how it ended up, and that's why the second edition is out.
What new evidence has recently come to light that continues to add logs on the pile to make this big old fire?
Well, I would tell you that we're constantly getting people calling saying, I knew him in Vietnam. That has been popping up quite a bit. We have over a dozen people from Rackstraw's former first cav. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have them because they all spoke the same language. They all spoke the same coding, the same code book that goes all the way back to World War I and the Navajos in World War II. And they had this language. And so we get members contacting us probably once every 2-3 months from Vietnam saying, you know, I wondered about him then, or he was an incredible pilot. I mean, he wound up flying the general into the Cambodia incursion. I mean, he's like Gump. He's everywhere. Everybody wanted him to fly and because he was an incredible pilot.
Yeah, when you're good at something, especially if it's dangerous and it has to get done, you find the guys that do those things well and you put them to work. I mean, that's why Rackstraw does what he does. And look at how much of a wild cat he was. This guy, what did he kill his own father and everything else? I mean, this guy was.
Yeah, that's what his crime partner said. And his aunt said, he killed my brother. I mean, it's very obvious. And even the attorney on the trial said, I love small town juries. That was his answer when he cleared him. You know, he was shrewd. He had claimed, what was it, Eric, over 40 medals and honors. And when it came back from the Pentagon, it took 2 weeks to get the records back then. After the trial, he was found not guilty. It turned out 13 of the medals were phony. I mean,
one of the photos that Tom has, you can actually see, you know, here's a guy that he had a you know, an exciting career, you know, military career as a Vietnam vet, but then, you know, one of the last photos of him in uniform is an official photo of him posing with stolen valor as a lieutenant colonel rank, with all these medals that you know, we went back and checked through. It's like he didn't earn this, he didn't earn that. That's not, you know, that's not correct. And he dang sure was not promoted to 05. You know, there's nothing in there of that. And again, why would you need to do that when you already have, you know, a decent track record of military service, except for the fact that you still have that narcissistic, you know, narcissistic personality trait where you have to inflate yourself more and more. And that's why, again, when you look at the entirety of Rackstraw's life, you find that the hijacking and the time as, you know, the one DB Cooper event is just one event of an entire life of grifting and scams and, you know, and deals that he's making that really is a way of him, you know, of a personality trait of somebody thinks that society is beneath me, and if I'm going to live the life to take care of number one, I'm going to do everything I can to, you know, who cares what society's rules are? I'm going to cheat and steal and do everything I can because, damn it, I deserve it and I'm better than that. And so it all fits within that, you know, a narcissistic sociopath personality.
Do you guys have a profiler on the staff that looks at things like this? I mean, when you talk about this guy, I think robbing an airplane and jumping out, that seems like nothing in this guy's career. It's like the 15th coolest thing he did.
Well, there are actually two people that fit that. One is
Yeah.
his former lieutenant colonel, who brought him on after one of the high-tech choppers involved with triangulation, the early days of triangulation. One of those choppers shot down, and Rackstraw was working in a repair shop, and he said, "I can do that." He said, "You have top secret clearance?" "Yeah, sure." And he got in. He trained him for 8 weeks, and then he found out he set a jail cell on fire as a teenager, and he could not pass top secret clearance. And that's when he looked into him and just said he is a con artist. The other person, obviously, Erik, is our Jack on our team, who a former FBI profiler, who actually looked at his codes that we had translated and opened up the codes, and he said, "This is the character of Rackstraw, and that's why I absolutely feel they have solved the case." And he's a wonderful profiler out of Chicago.
Right. And he wasn't a Jack as a profile. He was a code breaker. And so when he started breaking and seeing the embedded codes, who else but a narcissist would sign his name to all 6 letters?
Actually, that's Erik. You're speaking of. I'm sorry, Rick.
You're
Sherwood.
right. Rick. I'm sorry.
He
Rick.
was the code breaker that worked.
Right. I'm
Jack.
sorry.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. He was a 3-tour NSA expert. And to this day, he's in his 70s now, and he has 11 codes in his head still.
Yeah.
It took him 2 months to break those codes, and he did. He broke every one of them in 6 letters.
Yeah.
When you look at, I mean, just in general, when people talk about these things, they deny there's a lot of things like the code talk. There's code talk in all kinds of military MOSs. In my MOS specifically, just in surveillance, there's an entire alternate way that I can speak openly, and you'll have it'll sound like English words, but it's gibberish if you don't know what you're listening for.
Right.
And by the time you figured it out, it wouldn't even be employable anyhow, right? So a lot of jobs have these kind of things, not just lingo, but specifically designed lingo to be confusing to someone in the open. These are common things. Is that a common thread outside of the military as well, do you think, Erik?
You're going to see that, more and more. There's, like I said, Intel has escaped the military for sure. And it is within corporate America. It is within, they call it business intelligence or competitive intelligence. And so, you're going to have that, everywhere, including the political piece, arena. So that's, of course, you're going to have your secure communications from a cyber or, electronic security standpoint. But even then, you're going to have folks passing stuff in between. One great technique is to build yourself a Gmail account. You never send any emails, but your buddy has the password. So all you're doing is writing draft emails. He goes online, signs into the same account, and he's getting your messages. You never have to mail anything anymore. So actually transmit communications anymore. All you need to do is have joint accounts like that.
Yeah.
Easy peasy.
Save a lot of time because you're not encoding something from a one-time pad for 6 hours.
The standard methods of soaking up communications traffic, you don't have to have that if all you're doing is writing drafts to joint accounts,
right.
Or you're contributing to the same cloud, it's from a different, same people in different parts of the world that are just accessing the same account. It's easy.
I have to bring up one of our favorite people who was on our team. She's passed, God bless her, and that's Shannon Rossmiller. She not only worked on the original manual for cyber intelligence, she invented, you remember, Erik, emails that would vanish within 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that we were all introduced to that. It was fascinating.
Yeah. I think there's even a social media site. I can't remember what it's called, but where you can share photos and share messages that will disappear within a certain period of time. So it's, but the thing is, like, what's that?
Snapchat does that, or at least they used to.
I think Snapchat. There's other sites that are like that, and I can't remember some of the names off the top of my head. But you can, it allows you some quick communications that are supposedly non-trackable. But I tell you, anytime you put something in ones and zeros, somebody can get it.
Yeah.
One of the things in these comments, and some of them are silly and some of them are combative, so I'm putting up
I
as many
understand.
to be fair. But
Yeah, no
I
worries.
see him. I see him.
here's a good question, though: is how important is this DB Cooper case? I mean, how many tens of millions of dollars have been spent on a dude who robbed? I don't know, what is it?
Yeah.
Even $250,000? I mean,
Oh, much more.
Yeah, like we said though, this is really not a cold case as much as it's a historical case. Now it is so old. Whose life really does it affect now, except for some of the traumatic events in somebody's past life, like the crew that is still alive, or friends and relatives and things like that. Beyond that, it's just the mystery that is for the I guess for the fans of mystery. That's you're not solving national security crises. You're not taking a killer off the street. For crying out loud, the guy was went on to his next grifting operation and then passed away to his own accord. So we're solving it because we can solve it, but that's why we're nothing near as important as these unsolved cases that pop up every day
Around
and
the
every year
country.
and are tearing families
Yeah.
apart.
Yeah, yeah, and that's in essence our going to be our bread and butter when we have these last big mysteries finally put to bed at the end of next year. DB Cooper part a 5-parter is not coming out until summer. Zodiac probably 2023. And so we have all these small cases, and we have the interest of 2 networks that we had over 20, as I mentioned earlier, we had over 20 companies around the world want to partner with Zodiac, but they also want a series. They're talking about a series with our team, and that's a compliment not to me, it's to the lions and tigers I work with, and we're going to multiply them, and that's our focus.
do you guys work at all with Phil Chalmers? He's fascinating. He, I guess the best way to say it is he befriends and gains the trust of arrested and convicted and incarcerated serial killers. And one of the things he does is he figures out the simple things that they want for the rest of their lives. And these aren't like, it's like not like a Cadillac. It's like, I like pictures of World War II airplanes. And he curries favor with them to try to help find the Green River Killer killed so many people he can't remember where they even all are, right? So he tries to find these things and provide closure in his own way. And it's funny, he finds a similar thing where he'll say, and this guy's credible. He's done this over and over and over again, right? And he'll go to the police and say, "Hey, there's a body buried by this tree," and then the police do one of 3 things. One is they get it right and they figure it out and they go to the site and take care of it. 2 is they deny it and don't do anything, and 3 is they rush in to talk to the serial killer without having built the trust, and they smash that trust. And that 2 out of 3 of those options are really terrible. But is someone like that valuable to you guys? Do you guys ever work with him at all?
I will tell you that there are, what I understand from Mark Reinecke, who is the former head of psychiatric care at Northwestern, who is also going to be involved in helping with some of our traumatized people. Mark told me that there are 2 experts, and I'll bet you one of them's the man you've just spoke of, who have complete access to death rows. And there is an incredible book, and I just don't have it at the tip of my tongue, but I have a feeling that's what you were talking about, Pete. It's an incredible access, and getting them to open up is key. What's the point? What are they hiding now after they've been convicted?
I mean, that was the whole purpose of the Netflix series. They only went 2 series, but I'm trying to remember what it was called. Where it shows the start of the case, the FBI's serial profiling unit. I'm trying to remember the name of the series, but it was riveting for 2 seasons, but then it just kind of disappeared on its own accord.
Phil Chalmers for sure is one of the top guys. I'll put the link to his episode here for anybody's watching. He's incredible at what he does. It's just how tied in he is to these guys. During the episode that we did, one of these guys calls in and he's like, "Hey, Phil, you got time to talk?" And he's like, doing a show, so these guys use their very infrequent phone calls to call him. Like, that's how much he connects with them, and slowly gets them to. He's like, "Look, we all know you've done it. Who else is out there? How else can we close some of these cases?" And then, some of these guys have killed so many people. There's innocent people in jail for those crimes because,
Yeah,
it's just hard, it's hard to figure these things out if you can never get the right guy.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's go back to DB Cooper. The case as it is right now, are you guys actively pursuing anything else, or do you guys consider this thing closed?
Well, I can tell you up front that we have had several developments as part of the second doc that's coming.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I can't talk about the details, but I will tell you that we tackled the most important thing was when Erik and I and the team were ready to turn in our evidence, they didn't accept it and slammed the door on us. That information, we've taken it further. And we not only sued for a half year to get the file on Cooper, but we had several high-ranking commanders come to us who were involved in Iran-Contra and elsewhere. And there are several new interviews with former CIA about Mr. Rackstraw. And that will be coming out in the 5-parter next year. And that should open the eyes of a lot of the naysayers.
Right. So-called Cooperites.
Right.
The other thing is why would you guys work so hard on something? Suing, it costs money. Filling out these FOIA requests, that takes time, which is money. I mean, you guys are working hard to try to either prove or disprove your position. And that's not something that someone who isn't confident in what they're doing is going to do. I've never written a FOIA requested by DB Cooper because I don't care. You
Yeah.
care about this. That's a lot of evidence about you've got this big puzzle put together, and you're like, here are some areas where we can get more answers and firm our case up. People who are fooling around don't do that.
Well, I would tell you that Erik and I are driven, and most of the team that I know. Look, I've only met a third of the team. They have the passion is the same between Erik and me and Jen and all the others and Bill Proctor. We all want to get right what's going wrong. And the nice thing is they can do it from their lazy boys, their golf courses, and their fishing boats. And that's how we're getting the information. So absolutely, yeah, it costs money. And that's one reason we were planning to go to a .org, and we are now a .org. But that was a stumbling block when the FBI pulled our top 18 pieces of evidence out of the first documentary, and we had to prove that. It was very expensive, but what else is there in life but trying to solve and seek truth? I mean,
When
that's
you
an important
it's a
thing.
ballpark number, what does that mean? I mean, very expensive to me is $200.
What's that now?
When you say very expensive to prove something, about the FBI and your evidence, what does that cost? What does a case cost to put together?
Well, I would tell you is, you have to have a second job or a wife who has a great job, and or a man, and Jen has a great husband who is supportive. That helps. I would tell you, when we had to sue and we got sidetracked for 4 years, that was very difficult. I mean, in all honesty, it's the figure of money in the red we went into was very close to the amount of money given to DB Cooper, 200 grand. And so we're fortunately in a better situation now, but it was a very difficult thing. But Donna and I looked at each other, and I married one of the heroes of my stories who has an incredible sense of justice. And she said, we got to keep going. And we did. And here we are. Erik, you must have some feedback on that.
Part of it is it's not so much from the members of the team. I mean, Tom has shouldered a lot of the, as the team lead, the lion's share of it. But for everybody else, it's how much time do you have available to sacrifice? I mean, it's just, besides working, your 40 plus hour a week job. My wife keeps saying Erik has 4 jobs. He works his day job. He's writing his, he finished his and published a book. He's marketing that, and he's working on this case breaker thing, and that's taking the available time. I'll tell you, if I was earlier in my life when my kids were living at home, or all the involvement I had in good Lord, Boy Scouts and schools and athletics and, all the things that you're doing to help, raise kids, I wouldn't have time for any of this.
Sure.
Yeah. It depends on the time of our lives, and we have a rule at the Case Breakers, and that is real life first. And we're willing to wait when they can join us, whether it's sickness or a family issue. I just noticed somebody on the website talking about why do you prevent Case Breaker members from talking? Well, we don't go to the cameras unless there is a problem, number one. And number two, we make our money back with the docs. So we're not going to have all the Case Breakers on the air.
There's also a simple answer in terms of unity of effort and one voice that every organization has. Last thing you need is somebody that says they're on Case Breakers going on, causing a problem that's a liability issue.
Right.
And then just, hey, this guy, we had him on our team, but then he went off and said all these things that are slanderous and libel, and now we're being sued because this guy has no fire control on his mouth.
Yeah.
And that's, every organization has that. I don't think I've been in one that's not. I mean, even coming on today with my the new company I work for, I went and got, permissions and guidance and, made sure everything was good to go before I did that. And when I was looking for another very small company called, a small business called Lockheed Martin, there was no way I would have been able to get on any of these because their controls are, it's too much of a financial risk to have, from members of the company, especially if you say you're representing their company, which I'm not. There's all kinds of problems with that, and that's the last thing you want is folks is going out. So it's more of a control issue and more of a liability issue than, there's no such thing as freedom of speech in the court when you're being sued for libel and slander. So
and I will say that look, I've never been sued in 40 years. I'm meticulous, and I bring on team members that have that same philosophy and record because look, we don't always agree. We have wonderful stormy discussions among the 40 when it comes to evidence, and we fight back and forth, but that's the whole point. That's why this team succeeds, because we eventually come to the truth.
One of the things I would say too to Darren, and this is with all respect to Darren, you guys are on an independent podcast right now. I mean, it's not impossible.
That's true. Right.
I've built a relationship, with you guys so that we can do these things. And I would encourage Darren, reach out to me and you can co-host an episode next time we're having Case Breakers on. We can go that route. And
most of our teammates are, by nature, the guys who are doing the investigative work and have done it for decades and decades. Most of the folks are introverted anyways. And says, especially, anybody has served time in the government military, you've been pounded in the head with training every year. It's just that going into media is a sure way of screwing your career.
Yeah.
So if you are going to be on anything, you have to be very careful. I'm very reserved in everything I say on any channel, including Pete, who I've known for 25 years. It's just, there's things you say and there's things you don't say.
We have spokespeople for the FBI on our team, 10 members. Yeah. We have them for the field teams. There are about a half dozen, Erik being one. We call them the Talking Heads, and it's not my favorite band, but actually the best people on our team who really can lay it out clearly. And that's important for every company.
It's a big puzzle, again, to explain all this stuff. We talk about Zodiac. You guys have new information about Donna Lass that nobody else has had. And you guys have places where you can apply your skills and try to expand that and prove or disprove theories and everything. There's a lot that goes into that. And I guess this brings us back kind of almost to the beginning when we were talking about these cold cases. And we've covered this before, but I think it's important to kind of go through it again. How many man hours does it take to crack a case? And you guys sometimes have to wait 4 years on legal things. And the system doesn't have time for that. It just works on it as long as it can. But it's taken you guys thousands of man hours just to get to where you are with DB Cooper. And what organization could put that much effort and money and time into something like that?
One that's an active law enforcement? None. It's nowhere near. Again, it's like set your priorities. You want to go after some old dude that passed away 2 years ago that didn't kill anybody, that only stole $250,000, or do you want to go after an active missing child, or something that's for a case that's more recent where the family's who has assets to devote it to that? And that's really one of the strengths behind the model that Tom put together is he's relying upon experts who are seasoned enough that and they have the time available. These are folks who are retired, and you still have the mental acuity and the skill set, but you're not necessarily tied to having to work these other cases for a full-time job. And so you have to have the right, just like the book I put together, you got to have the right combination of the data and the tools and the people and the processes. This is a type for cold case that's different than an active police force that's working gangs, or somebody who's doing cyber defense or whatever. When you're putting people into a group, into an operation specifically for their skill set and specifically for their ability to work a different type. Cold case is a different type of process than an active case.
Eric, would you mention the name of the book? I didn't hear it.
Well, it's Intelligence Operations on Understanding Data, Tools, People, and Processes. That's the book I published in 2020.
And it's the first of its kind.
It's essentially a guide for all these organizations that are starting up intelligence operations, but really have to know that the soup to nuts of what do I need in terms of personnel, what do I need in terms of processes, and how do I develop that kind of thing.
I'm going to counter my kids now. I'm going to say there's no app for that, Eric.
What's that?
There's no app.
No, and there's not going to be one right now. So.
Here's the link to Eric's book right there if you're into it. It's heady. So if you want to learn about intelligence operations, you're going to have to either come in with some knowledge or be willing to expand your brain. I've read that book, and you're right. It's on the money. How do you put a guy like me to work in an intelligence operation? How do you gather these assets? It's excellent, Eric. You've done a great.
The feedback I've gotten has been very readable, because there is stuff on. There is doctrinal stuff, joint publications from the Department of Defense, and that's some of the most dry and boring stuff you've ever had to go through, and it doesn't apply to anybody. So it's, this was really more for, and I'll give an example of one of the organizations that came to us when I was training, is we had a no kidding company that was in the entertainment industry. It rhymes with it rhymes a lot with Disney. So these guys think about the business case for them. You want to go to the Magic Kingdom and have an absolutely wonderful time and forget about the rest of the world and the attention to detail. What happens to that? What happens to your experience when somebody with a suicide bomb or whatever shows up and blows himself up while everybody's in line to get in? That is incredibly important to them, not only from a security standpoint, but from a business standpoint. So they have, you think somebody as a company as innocuous as Disney has to take a look at terrorist threats. They have to take a look at criminal threats. There's, one of the biggest reasons why they search your backpacks when you're going in. It's not, besides bombs or weapons or anything else, it's people sneaking their parents' ashes into the theme park to dump them off into the somewhere in the park, and it's a daily occurrence. But the folks that we trained from there, they had a team for their Burbank studios, they had a team for every theme park. And every part of the entertainment industry has that requirement to do. They don't call it intelligence, but they do call it security or corporate security or whatever, and every corporation has it. That's the kind of what I mean by intelligence is no longer government and military, Department of Defense. Everybody has to do that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Hey, Tom, I want to ask you, one of the things is it's one thing to go out and do these things. It's another thing to take it to a network and publish it, especially if there's a risk of a lawsuit. And the lawsuit doesn't have to be legitimate. You can still end up in discovery and have to pay someone out just to make them go away. So you're dealing with something where there's a lot of responsibility to get things right and not find yourself in court or put your client, your purchaser of your movie in court. How much do, when you sit at that table and you're pitching your show, how much is this true come across? Like, are they worried about that, or they want the salacious win?
Well, I went with our FBI guys who lead our team for their thoughts on how we can put these books together, how we can put the docs together. and they help edit our ICs. And this is the longest one we did, of course, because it was 7 years. I mean, that's 103 pages that Erik put into a link chart because it was so big, it was hard to. But the timeline is what they told us is the key. Make sure to put bullets, put the dates. But he said also, this one particular FBI agent said, also have the source materials by each bullet, initials of who spoke, the documents you used, what are they? Is there video? Is there, color code showing video versus audio? All of that is under each bullet. So that when we take these things to a documentary buyer or a network, they can go right out the gate and start shooting. They have all the contacts. We've already befriended, for example, in the Zodiac case, we found out there are 20 siblings of the victims that have never been approached by anyone. Yeah. Never mind the town that has learned the Zodiac is there, and they're sleeping in their closets and in their couches. They're so freaked out since this came out initially in 2014. What about the family members? Nobody has even mentioned them. We are absolutely going to get those family members together for the Zodiac because that's an important part of recovery.
Yeah. And I would tell you the documentary that we're working on or finishing up now for Cooper that comes out next summer. They actually do have folks that they brought on that they interviewed and just says that they said that we don't believe that Raxrow is a guy. I mean, so they're not just parroting. It's not a documentary just to parrot a particular narrative that we've pushed out or something like that. They're doing a very well thought of introspective look by bringing on folks that says, here's a reason why I don't think that he did it or whatever. I mean, so that's what is it? We report, you decide, that type of a thing. It's like that's the way a true documentary should be done. It should, we're getting to the point where if it's not a narrative, then there's no point of publishing it. I think that's a false model.
I give credit to the streaming service, and we don't name them. Yeah. The streaming service we're working with. I give credit to the company. We had to go all the way to London to get a company because we had 8 partners for the second DB Cooper show. All meet with us, said this is wonderful, we want to do it. The minute they called the FBI to say, would you be involved in this like you were in history? And they said, if you work with Colbert, we're not going to work with your channel again. So we had to go all the way to London, and that's when we found a wonderful company who in essence said, the FBI can't touch us here. And that was the only way we could get it out, Erik, you remember?
Yeah.
It was just crazy.
There was a question about any new breaks on the Zodiac case, and we just did this on Monday. Tom and I, we spent a whole hour talking about the case, and so I'll put the link for that into here, and you'll be able to see that if you're listening on the podcast side. It'll be in the show notes, or just go to youtube.com/PDATurner, and then all that stuff will come up, and you'll be able to find it. But just if you're looking right now, you can go to that link, and you will see the one that we did on Monday. What cases are interesting to you guys? I mean, we can't just get like further and further back. Like we know that we know who kidnapped Lindbergh's baby, and gosh, who's even alive to even care about it, right? Like, what are the cases that are relevant to you guys that you want to get your hands on, and now that you're kind of freeing yourself from Cooper and you're getting past Zodiac, where do you want to put your capacity?
I know Erik has ideas. I'll just put out front that the small teams are the future. 2 to 3 members going out into small towns. We have one of the 2 companies that is negotiating 2 networks for our not only the documentary and Zodiac, but a series. And in conjunction with the series, we can expand the teams. And that's why, Pete, that's why we're with you. We want to find candidates in law enforcement, former law enforcement. So that is the hope, and that's the direction we're taking. Erik?
I think along the same lines of Tom is it's really more of building a model so that what we've done on this team for these high visibility cases can then be recreated across every state. And that's, personally, if I work these different cases, always in the back of the mind was one that is personal to me, is a friend of mine and a former work colleague that I've known for, also for 30 years, that recently suffered a family tragedy that has no closure to it, and with multiple fatalities and that kind of thing. And I think of my friends, and just the suffering that he's gone through, and what I wish I could do, if we could put the right assets to it. But again, once it's gone cold, there's not much you can do, in terms of law enforcement then has to go to the next thing. Is like, okay, what's an active case where we can really do something about. So it's, so you think about it in terms of a historical viewpoint, you think about in terms of a business model, but then ultimately it hits homes as you think about in terms of some personal friends that that are suffering from a case or a crime that's devastated their family, and you want to help them as best you can.
The only way we're going to get, and I mentioned this earlier, Pete, is the only way we're going to get back to where we remember most our world was, and that was when a serious crime like this wouldn't be in the neighborhood. You'd say, "Oh my gosh, that's never happened here."
Yeah,
we truly see these teams expanding for the purpose of knocking on the door a year later and saying, "Here's an update on your daughter," or "You're not getting return calls from that department. We'll take over for you."
Yeah.
Going into the jail and learning that somebody is innocent and getting them out. I mean, that's what law enforcement is, racing from crime to crime. And there's not enough tax dollars in the world, I like to say, for more cops, let alone defunding cops. It has to be people in their 50s and up who can't climb the fences, but they've got their brains. And that's what we need.
Yeah, you're right about that. There's not enough of that. By the way, they also want to have these cops in training, becoming brown belts in jiu-jitsu. And it's like, hey, it's getting really expensive and unrealistic. So I appreciate you guys putting the effort in. And you're right, Erik, there's all kinds of people. All you got to do is ask around on your friend group, and all of a sudden you find out. The guy from my hometown, his daughter was killed with his ex-wife and the other guy's wife. So this man murdered his wife, murdered his girlfriend, and murdered that girlfriend's daughter.
Gosh. Right.
We don't know where the guy is. We don't, and that's the assumption, right? Because we haven't been able to close the case because the guy's on the loose still. So it's everywhere. It's all over the place where someone or someone you know's relative had their brains bashed in by somebody, and we just don't know what happened. And there is no closure. Right. And there's not going to be without a team like the Case Breakers.
Yeah. And that's the thing is there's how much evil can you prevent in the world? Well, very few. But how much justice can you do? Maybe a little bit more. I mean, that's really when you get right down to it. It's not there's really no desire. I don't think there's anybody on our team that has a desire for fame and fortune and all that kind of to build off of that for their own purposes. Nobody's really doing it for that. And then at the same time is, we're also not so wedded to every answer that is, that we're just like everybody else. Like, if it's not these guys, then you're crazy. That's, I don't know how many times I've seen that, but what was really, really heartbreaking is after the Zodiac, Tom broke the Zodiac case, and him and his wife started getting folks that were volunteering for work and, were interested in doing that kind of thing. But then they also started getting, emails from folks that were pleading for help with their relative or whatever. And it's just heartbreaking that, they put it in a file so we can review it and take a look at it. And you just go through there and you get done. And all you can do is just, thank God that you've been able to, yourself personally has stayed away from that type of a tragedy. Because what these folks are going through is just, God, Lord, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's exactly. The Innocence Project has other problems. But everybody, for the most part, who knows what they do, they're like, yeah, this is great. Please keep doing this. You guys are the same people. You're just working on a part of the problem. Right. How do we get you guys from where you're at now, where it's like, that's a bunch of crap. Everybody knows that Rackstraw didn't do it because he had a white beard, not a brown beard. And you're like, what? How do we get you guys to the point where it's like, yeah, you know what? I don't even care if you're not batting 1,000%. You guys are advancing the ball down the field, to mix my metaphors. what do we got to do to make you guys more credible, like the Innocence Project, where they're lauded and seen as an asset, at least overall?
I would say that law enforcement, the bigger the agency, the more politics, unfortunately, and that's what we've learned. We're going to be sticking to the smaller agencies who are absolutely grateful to what we're doing, and eventually that's going to percolate up. I truly feel that the agencies will look at it, and as far as the public accepting us, it has to be when these cases come out. And we right now have DNA at 3 labs involving shells and other things that have been recovered on the Zodiac. And we're probably going to get answers in the next, month or so. But because it's a documentary, folks, you have to wait for the documentary to air so that we can make the money back.
Well,
but the more volunteers we have, the more funding we get. Everybody can fund it. Casebreakers.org. If you want to be involved, there's a way to get involved and help expand the teams so that you do get those knocks on the door again.
Yeah. And, Pete, this goes back full circle to what we talked about at the beginning. We could find, where we think, where we've been tipped off to where Hoff is buried. We could dig it up. We could find, to the point where we could do even a dental records and a DNA thing, and somebody would still come out and says, you fabricated it.
Right.
It's just there is, we've been doing this long enough so we know that there is just no pleasing some folks, and you're going to get some folks to do it just to be trolls, and some folks who just they've already had their decision made up and they've done an extensive amount of research. The last thing they want to do is to see the teacher's edition and say, oh my God, I was wrong. Nobody goes back and says, man, I ought to fix the way I did my thought process. It's like, no, you're an idiot. Your team is full of garbage. That's an easier way to handle that. So you're never going to get everybody.
Well, your link analysis is wrong.
Right.
We all have to have thick skins. Obviously, that's what we learned. And I'm the son of a shrink, and my dad he taught all 7 of us. We're here to help others seek truth and bring joy. And I do all of that. I'm the joke teller. My brothers hate me because I can memorize jokes. but that's what keeps us going, and we keep our eye on the ball. That's all we can do.
Not any good jokes, but you memorize them.
Occasionally. Occasionally. I save the good ones for my friends, Eric.
I see.
Me too.
I'll have to watch out when one comes across.
Everybody should check out casebreakers.org if you want to be involved, if you want to help. Look, if you disagree with these guys, why don't you get a hold of them and say, hey, let me help. Let me be, because you need voices of dissent. They need that kind of stuff. So if you want to be involved, if you're not going to be involved with Zodiac because it's basically done, you can be involved with something else that's coming up and everything else. I'm curious what you guys think on, right now we're in an era where if a DA comes in and is very pro DNA evidence, they'll lean on it hard and they'll crack old cases with DNA. At some point, I would imagine that we could put DNA into a public space where you can run other analysis up against this existing DNA, list of clients. California basically has DNA on every inmate, even ones that are dead.
Right.
There's a lot of medical privacies and restrictions that make that impossible. I mean, there's,
and we have 1 or 2 labs that have access to CODIS, for example, the bank for DNA, and they can check things out because they're active law enforcement and they feel it's important on a 30-year-old case. We are getting into the field.
Right. And you can link someone who's 2, 3, 6, spots removed in, say, the Ancestry database.
Yeah.
You go, okay, we know we're in the right family tree, and then pursue it that way.
But again, that's like Tom said, you have to work within the law enforcement community on there, because you've got to get into the realm of organizations and agencies that have the responsibility or the authority to protect personal PII, personally identified information. And on the medical side, that's a huge deal. Once that slips out into the commercial industry, there's so many nefarious actors like, well, I can use this, I can pull this guy's DNA and I can use it for all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah. And look, people say, well, how does this team get access? Well, it started with me with 17 years at CSTI, California Specialized Training Institute. And that's where I got the team started. We got FBI guys, we got intelligence guys, and they're my students. And we have about 4,000 students around the country. So between the team and my students, we can have a friendly conversation with any police department in the country. You can't get that when you're sitting in your room looking at Zodiac saying, I have him. You have to have a network, and that's what we have.
It's Arthur Lee Allen again. All right, let me wrap this thing up. Stand by, fellas.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.